We begin with Edward Said. According to the New York Times, he changed the face of scholarship on the Arab world. Edward Said was born in Jerusalem, raised in Egypt, and educated in the United States. After receiving his Ph.D. in English literature at Harvard, he became a professor of English and comparative literature at Columbia. And then, following the Six-Day War in 1967, he was politicized. He met Yasser Arafat, sat on the Palestine National Council, and he became the most outspoken American defender of Palestinian self-determination. He's written over a dozen books and recently published 2 new collections of essays, Representation of the Intellectual and the Politics of Dispossession. I'm very pleased to have Edward Said back here at this table. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to see you
Good
again.
to be here. Thank you.
Boy, so much has happened. Let me just walk through it with you. I mean, today's headlines are Rabin and Hussein, and building between Aqaba and Eilat, Hussein and Rabin in Washington, Arafat and Rabin in Washington. Are we one Assad away from peace in the Middle East?
Well, it's difficult to tell, but I think probably in the end, yes, I think there will be a peace agreement with Syria. I don't think Assad has much choice, but he's trying to get the best deal he can, I think.
And is that a good thing?
I think peace is very good, of course, and I'm for it. Unfortunately, the Palestinian side of the whole equation, you know, the peace that was signed in Washington.
What I meant, obviously.
Yeah, well, that has been a tremendous, to me at least, tremendous disappointment, and I think it expresses more a capitulation on the Palestinian side than it does an achievement towards peace. I think what Arafat got was a tiny pair of enclaves, one of which, Gaza, the Israelis have been trying to get rid of for a long time, and the other, Jericho, is a 50 square mile area, which he supposedly controls. But in fact, the Israelis are still there.
But if you looked at the reality, why isn't it a good idea for the Palestinians or the PLO to make that a deal? When you looked at the reality they had and the alternative they had, and the fact that this might be the first step towards all of the West Bank, etc.
Well, there are 2 reasons to give, to respond to that. One is it wasn't the only alternative. There was a whole series of alternatives starting back in the 70s, some of which I was associated with, that Arafat and his group turned down out of, I think, stupidity. And the second thing is that the agreement made in Oslo last summer was really done with Arafat himself with his back to the wall. He had isolated himself. He had made foolish mistakes, beginning with the Gulf War. He was at a low ebb in terms of popularity and money and so on and so forth. So I think the agreement was a way of saving himself rather than thinking of his people. And the obvious parallel is Mandela in South Africa, who never wavered from his principles, although he was in jail for 27 years, and said, listen, what we want in the end is one person, one vote. We want the end of apartheid. Now, nothing in the agreements that Arafat has signed, whether Oslo or Cairo or whatever, says anything about the end of occupation. The Israelis are still there, the armies are still there, the settlements are still there, the settlements are increasing in size and number. In the months that he signed the agreements in September until now, the Israelis have confiscated another 20,000 acres of Palestinian land. So it's a terrible deal, and another additional reason is it was negotiated with tremendous incompetence. I mean, he didn't even have a lawyer with the Israelis or legal advice.
Outgunned or
outgunned, unprepared. All he wanted was to assure himself something so that he could continue. And now he's in Gaza, and you read the papers. I mean, he's unable to cope. He has no history, no experience in government, and he's alienated most of his good people, and it's a tremendous tragedy for the people, and that's what bothers me, because from the public relations point of view, it's a great scoop, the White House lawn, peace, and so on and so forth, but the fact is that more Palestinians have been killed since the thing was signed. You heard about the massacre, of course, at Hebron. The settlers, in other words, all the important problems have simply been postponed.
And terrorism in Buenos Aires and other places.
The whole cycle, exactly. So it's public relations, Israel getting its strategic objectives, the Arabs capitulating left, right, and center without coordinating at all. And Jordan has signed an agreement now, which, there's very little between Jordan and Israel to dispute. I mean, there's 100 and some square miles near the Dead Sea, but they'll be settled. But the important thing is that Israel is now achieving a kind of power in the Middle East, which makes it the superpower of the region. And it's essentially going to get entree into economic markets and so on and so forth. And the Arabs have no strategy. They have no plan. They have no vision. 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 They have no their societies are crumbling from within in the most dreadful way. And in my opinion, the future really looks very, very bleak.
For the Palestinians or for what?
Well, I think certainly for the Palestinians in the short run. I don't think Arafat will survive very long. He can't.
Because he will be assassinated, or because someone will...
I think the main problem right now is, for example, all the hospitals in Gaza are short of oxygen. He has to supply oxygen. He has to pay for his police force. He has to provide the teachers with money. He has to pave the roads. He's never done that. He has no money. The international community has promised X number of hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're simply not coming in because he refuses to be accountable. You see, they say, we'll give you money, but you have to tell us what the money's for.
You leave me with a lot to ask, but let me just start with this.
Yes.
Most of what you say seems to lie at the feet of Chairman Arafat. A, he could have had some better agreements in the past. B, it is Palestinians who insisted that the Israelis deal with Arafat. They much more would have preferred dealing with other Palestinians.
No, I don't think so. I think not. I think they prefer. I mean, I
well,
think
they may now, but
yeah, right.
But I remember times in which there's a whole wing of Israelis who believe that Arafat is a war criminal and don't want to deal with him still now.
Right.
And
well,
when
Arafat
he talks about Jerusalem, they go
berserk.
Right. And my point is that there was a time in which Israelis, they may want to deal with him now because he's weak and because they believe that it's the best time to make things happen, and because they think that he is the best person to make things happen with. But it's, some might say, the Palestinians' fault that they select their leader, so don't criticize the leader for the problems.
No, I think that you're partly right. I think that's very fair. There's no question that we've been very forgiving in our leadership. Don't forget, however, that we have no sovereignty. We have no place. I mean, Arafat was exiled to Tunis in 1982 from Beirut. We are a divided population. Some of us are Israeli citizens. There are 2 million Palestinians on the West Bank and Gaza. There are 4 million who are outside of Palestine. This is quite interesting. Most of the Palestinian population today does not live on historical Palestine. They live in the diaspora, in exile, in Lebanon and Jordan and so on and so forth. There's a very difficult circumstance. Israel had the United States.
And the United States.
200,000 in this country. We have never had a strategic partner the way Israel has had the United States. I mean, with the end of the Cold War, we were, and the Soviet Union wasn't much help.
And whose fault is that?
No, these are all, I think, objective circumstances. These are the realities of the situation. The Arab world itself is a treacherous environment. Every Palestine being the big cause of every Arab, right? So it was a question of who could capture Palestine as a tool of his or her own foreign policy. And so there was always a fight between the PLO and the other Arab states.
There was
Egypt,
a time that Syria wanted to take
went
it
to
over.
war. Went to war in 1983. They tried to destroy the PLO. So given all of that, there was a general feeling, shared by me among others, that he was our leader. He represented Palestine. He still does. He's a very popular man at one point. So you go along with him. And what developed, you see, was a sense that this forgave everything, that he could do anything. Now, we were all aware that in Tunis, and certainly in Beirut before that, he was essentially a tyrant in the sense that he wanted to do everything himself. You needed something.
And not a Democrat.
Well,
a little d.
Because of the circumstances of our existence, he couldn't control everything. So I could say whatever I wanted. I mean, he couldn't get back at me in any way or do anything to me. But what bothers me is that after, I think, 91, the Madrid conference, when I was very involved in the negotiations up until then I got ill and I resigned. I was a member of the council, as you say. What happened was, I think there was a sudden opening. There was a feeling that after the Gulf War, the Bush administration, that somehow Palestinians for the first time were being recognized. And that sense of recognition overshadowed everything else. The sense finally we were able, don't forget we were ostracized by the United States, not by the rest of the world, but by the United States.
You had to have secret meetings.
Exactly. So there was all of that going on. And I think where we went wrong, in my opinion, was a sense of rushing too quickly, and saying, let's take what we can get, without remembering the realities of the situation, and that what we were taking, what Arafat was taking. You see, at that point he'd gone out of control. No, he consulted nobody on this secret deal with the Israelis in Oslo. And by that time,
that probably was necessary. You know what I mean?
Some kind of. No, I'm not complaining about the secrecy as such, but I mean it covered a great deal of ground. Right. And what I think he did was to just give away a lot. Fine. But what bothers me, you see, is not that. I mean, we are weak. There's no question about it. But A, he killed the spirit of the Intifada, which had brought us many gains, right?
Yes.
And the spirit of resistance. He personally canceled that. He just said, well, we're stopping that, right? And number two, in my opinion, there wasn't honesty. You know, had he said, this is all we can get, this is a tragedy, we've lost Palestine, this is a flawed deal in the extreme, fight with me, help me. He didn't do that. He lied. He said, this is a great achievement. He stood on the White House lawn, he celebrated. He forgave Rabin. I mean, Rabin to us is the great criminal, don't forget. I mean, Rabin was personally responsible for making of refugees in 1948, 50,000 people he kicked out of Ramla and Lid. He was the man who was behind, he was the Minister of Defense during the Intifada. He's the man who said, break their bones and all the rest of it. Far more Palestinians were killed than Israelis were. So there was this collective amnesia. And I am ashamed that so many Palestinians went along with this in the, I think, foolish hope that it was suddenly going to turn into a wonderful thing. But if you read the text, not many people have read the text of the Declaration of Principles or the Cairo Accord. Many Israelis have said it's a disgraceful document. There isn't a single whit iota of generosity in it. It just compels Palestinians to be endlessly subordinate to Israel. It keeps the settlements in place. It keeps the army in place. And by and large, it gives the Palestinians what they call limited autonomy, but no self-determination. And I would have settled for self-determination as the goal, but it's not specified.
Yeah, but I mean, here is the other argument being made, and I hear you on that. And let me just talk about Arafat for a second.
Right.
You called him in '83 a man of audacity and vision. You followed that in '86, tragic and fascinating figure. In '88, you said he secured a place in Palestinian history. And then in '93, you say, foolish man who misunderstands his own people, and that the autocracy, the profligacy, and the corruption and the stupidity were all there for you to understand, and nobody was able and willing to speak to it.
No, that's not true. A lot of people spoke, including myself. I mean, there was a constant, of course, on the major issues, up until 1988, when we, and I was a member of the National Council, and I was one of the drafters of the thing that recognized Israel and so on and so forth, said we have to have two states.
Right.
He was part of the national consensus. It's after that that the change occurs. I mean, people change, sure. I mean, I'm not saying he still is a tragic figure. He still is a fascinating man. He's one of the.
He still has a place in the history of Palestine.
Of course. I mean, and that's what I said. I mean, he brought us to this point. But my point right now is that he should resign. He's done what he can do. There is nothing. He is unreformable. He cannot. He's never lived in a civil society. I mean, our new needs are to try to construct, in spite of the obstacles of the current situation, the lack of money, the chaos, et cetera, the years of occupation. You need a new set of goals, right? And he's incapable of providing them. That's what I'm saying.
And the argument is made, though, that he is still the one figure in which more Palestinians, both inside and outside, would you prefer to be Palestine, now the West Bank,
right?
More
for the time being.
He's the one figure that everybody can rally around.
Well, for the time being, but he is not, I don't think, the man, mark my words, I mean, I'm not a prophet, but my feeling is that he's now at the end of his tether. He has reached where he's going to reach. He's never going to get out of Gaza. He's not going to be able to increase the amount of self-determination that we have. We need a new generation. He's in his middle 60s, he's quite ill. He's out of touch. He has various illnesses. Right. I think many of them the result of his plane crash in 1991 or 92. And he's very, very, very tense. I mean, he has now surrounded himself by security apparatus. I mean, the idea that we fought all of these, we've made all of these enormous sacrifices. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed or dispersed, and losses. We lost Palestine. I mean, it's a tragic fact. The Palestine I was born in no longer exists. We've lost it, and new people have supplanted us and taken our land and lived there. It's a fact. It's Israel, right? But we have 20% of this left on the West Bank and Gaza, and that 20%, about 50% of it is already gone, as Israelis will tell you, through the settlements, the confiscations, and so on and so forth. The question is, can you do anything with what's left? I think you need a new vision. You need a new generation of leaders who are developing. Don't forget, we're 6 million people. We're a gifted population, and I think in time he will begin, the slow process of beginning to fail, which is very tragic, and more losses will occur, more killings, and...
Well, the argument from the Israeli side, in part, though, their practical reality, they would say, is that you better deal with Arafat,
right.
and the PLO.
Of course, and Jordan and so.
Because Hamas has a very different agenda.
That's not true, actually. I mean, that's one of the sort of propaganda things.
From...
Well, first of all, they were the people who, the Israeli government supported Hamas in the beginning. I mean, they were anxious to get something as an alternative to the PLO. But if you look at the facts and the figures, the fact is that Hamas has never gotten more than about 14 or 15% of any poll on the West Bank and Gaza. They represent now a kind of protest movement. They simply say, we are not interested in this kind of arrangement. Although at the same time, they're very interested in sharing power, if there's any power to be shared. On the other hand, do they represent an alternative? I mean, do they put forward
a different philosophy?
No, absolutely not.
No,
I don't think so.
Philosophy?
I mean, I've talked to them, I've seen their thing. They don't mobilize people. And that's the problem with them. I think the alternative, what I think the Israelis want, you see, is Arafat as their enforcer on the West Bank and Gaza. He is now responsible. It's cheaper than having the Israelis do it. He does it for them. On the West Bank, not on the West Bank, in Jericho and Gaza. Gaza, they couldn't rule.
What do you mean by enforcer?
He is supposed to provide them with security, right? And he is responsible. Gaza is one of the most fractious and rebellious places. That's where the Intifada started. Now it's his problem, not the Israelis. The Israelis control the borders, who goes in and out. But what occurs inside Gaza, which is a hellhole, and there are tough and brave and fighting people,